The map is lying to you about the Middle East. On one street, you'll hear an Armenian wedding chorus, Arabic gossip, Kurdish pop from a taxi, and three grandmothers' recipes fighting in the air. We're told this region is one block, one language, one faith, one story. But life ignores borders. In ports, Greek pastry sellers serve Arabic-speaking poets. In mountain villages, Assyrian hymns outlast kings. Along Bedouin routes, caravans stitch oases to empires. Diversity isn't the exception, it's the engine. And if we miss that, we misread today's headlines. We'll trace how geography, trade, and empires built this kaleidoscope. Who met where? Who cooked what? Which ideas hitched a ride? And we'll track one Middle Eastern language that quietly connected more empires than Latin or Arabic, and where you can still hear it. This is Armchair Archaeology, digging big histories from small details to make the past feel close enough to touch. Stay to the end for that connector tongue and the unexpected village where it still echoes. Unfold a modern map of the Middle East, and everything looks tidy. Crisp borders, clean colors, a promise of order. Walk a single block, and that promise dissolves. In one bakery queue, you'll hear a grandmother swapping spice tips in Arabic, a shepherd asking prices in Kurdish, and the baker's nephew teasing her in Armenian. The street doesn't care about lines. It runs on habit, kin, craft, and whoever brings the freshest bread. Political boundaries suggest one language, one story. Daily life layers many. Neighborhoods knit themselves through guilds and marriage, shared wells and borrowed tools, a web that ignores capitals. The best evidence isn't in poetry or legend, but in paperwork. The meticulous registers of Ottoman local courts, still stacked in dusty archives. Page after page casually records neighbors from different religious communities and mother tongues disputing roof lines, rain gutters, and olive trees. The clerks don't pause to explain the mix. They treat it as normal, like weather. Look for networks rather than boxes, and the picture sharpens. Caravan roads make cousins out of strangers. Ports remix tongues the way docks mix ropes and hulls. Mountain passes turn snowfall into impromptu festivals where pilgrims, peddlers, and muleteers share a chorus to pass the night. This messiness is a kind of strength. When drought bites or rulers change, one thread frays and others keep the cloth from tearing. Yet the same weave can tighten cruelly. A new tax favors one craft over another. An army recruits from one quarter. A poor harvest forces ugly choices about who eats first. The block that traded recipes yesterday might argue over water today. To read the region honestly, hold both truths at once. Mixture as the everyday baseline, tension as the recurring risk. Start with that lens, and the rest, trade routes, faith traditions, foodways, even the quiet connector language that kept ideas moving, begins to align.
Lay a finger on the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Orontes, and you're tracing human corridors older than most myths. Rivers don't just water fields, they choreograph encounters. Floodplains pull in farmers, boatmen, scribes, and tax collectors, each speaking in a slightly different cadence. In a Nile-side market, you can hear fishmongers timing prices to the season, desert herders bargaining for barley, and boat crews swapping river slang picked up 2 towns upstream. Water teaches people to share space because everyone needs the quay. Climb into the highlands and the script flips. The Taurus, Zagros, and Lebanon ranges break sound into pockets, a village per valley. A turn in the path, and the bread changes, The hat changes. Sometimes even the alphabet changes. Isolation protects shepherd calls and village rules the way cliffs shelter fig trees. That's why mountain faiths and dialects often feel so particular. The landscape edits slowly. But passes and summer pastures act like zippers. When herders and traders meet at a saddle, news travels faster than hooves. Follow the coast, and the accents start to blend again. The Levantine shore, the Red Sea, the Gulf, these are mixing bowls turned by wind. Sailors learned the rhythm of currents the way bakers learn ovens, and ports became translators. A dockside coffeehouse might seat a pearl diver, a spice broker, and a pilgrim waiting on a fair wind, all agreeing without saying it that weather is a better border than any line on a map. One grounded ferry can redraw a whole day's plan. In some Gulf towns, shipwrights built boats with Indian timber, African rope, and local pitch. The hull itself was a conversation. Then there are the in-betweens where worlds overlap. South Iraq's marshes grew houses from reeds and hosted canoe-borne markets, a water village between steppe and city. Geography isn't a backdrop here, it's the casting director. It decides who meets, who keeps to themselves, and which pieces of culture get traded, saved, or remixed for the next journey downstream. If following these hidden routes of rivers, passes, and shorelines shifts how you see the map, subscribe so you're here for the next dig. If geography casts the play, ports and markets write the dialogue. Step into a Levantine bazaar at noon and the air tastes like cumin and copper. Scales clatter, cardamom blooms from coffee stalls. Cloth merchants snap indigo bolts like pennants. Prices aren't fixed, they're negotiated into being. And the currency is as much language as coin. A sailor with tar-dark sleeves haggles in a stitched-together patter. 2 words of Persian, a line of Arabic, a shrug borrowed from Greek, while a scribe nearby turns waits and wishes into a receipt. Caravanserais did the same work inland. Those square courtyards with iron-banded doors were night shelters for goods and gossip. Picture the scene as the gates thud shut. Camels grumble, lamps come alive, and the upper galleries hum. Herders from the steppe, silk merchants from farther east, a spice broker bound for the sea. Dinner is a geography lesson. Flatbreads blistered on a griddle, dates from a southern oasis, dried yogurt from high pastures. In the morning, the ledger at the gate lists names spelled 3 ways, cargo measured in units that reveal where the scales came from, and notes dashed off in whichever script the clerk learned first. A single page might juggle Arabic totals, Persian margins, and a Greek loanword for a tool no one bothers to translate. Ports dialed the mixing up another notch. In Alexandria or Basra, you could watch a dhow unload timber from India, take on Gulf pearls, and sail out with amphoras of oil and a new proverb. Coffee houses doubled as newsrooms, their trending topics moving faster than any feed. A melody picked up from a pilgrim 2 monsoons ago becomes the chorus everyone knows. Even insults travel. One generation's trade slang settles into the next generation's bedtime song. Follow the sound of bargaining, and you can hear ideas hitching rides the way bales do. Bundled tight, tied to a strong back, and headed for the next courtyard where somebody is always awake, counting. The Ancient Secrets mug was designed to echo the same court seals and caravan scripts threaded through this story. There's a link in the pinned comment for anyone who wants a small artifact of that world within arm's reach.
Conquest sounds like a single drum, but the great empires of the Middle East played chamber music, many parts, tightly arranged. Picture an Achaemenid official riding out with orders sealed in bright clay. At the next satrapy, a provincial district, the seal is broken, the message recopied,
and a local unit measures grain in a different basket size, yet the tax still arrives on time. The trick wasn't sameness, it was letting provinces keep their weights, their courts, their priests, and then stitching those differences together with roads, posts, and paperwork. Rome and then Byzantium practiced a similar arc along their eastern frontiers. A city could host a bishop's court, a guild court, and a governor's bench on the same street, each with its own vocabulary for fairness. What reads as exotic now was routine then. One surviving lease from a desert town lists a tenant, a guarantor, a vineyard, and 3 calendars: the local civic year, a provincial reckoning, and the imperial count, dates cross-checked like belt and suspenders. The Islamic caliphates scaled the method. Governors swore oaths, tax registers were copied in duplicate. Scholars codified what had worked for centuries. Let communities pray, teach, marry, and bury by their own rules, and tap the flow at the customs house. When the Ottomans inherited that orchestra, they tuned it rather than rewriting the score. Armenian patriarchs notarized marriages, Greek bishops recorded births, Jewish courts sealed contracts. If a dispute crossed lines, a judge in the main court might hear witnesses in 3 languages, glance at a contract in a different script, and issue a ruling everyone recognized because the stamps were right and the neighbors were watching. From the outside, this looks chaotic. Too many laws, too many ledgers. From the inside, it feels practical, like several help desks under one roof, each stamping a different kind of problem into silence. A world of differences given corridors to move through, and desks where a seal could turn noise into agreement. That's how a patchwork becomes an empire that lasts longer than its kings. Stand at dawn in an old quarter, and the day announces itself in layers. The muezzin's call thins into bell chimes, and somewhere behind both, a low chant rises from a house where the Sabbath begins at sunset, not sunrise. On paper, the Middle East looks like neatly labeled faiths. On the street, devotion is braided into errands. A grocer closes early on Friday. A tailor won't stitch on Saturday. A metalworker times his break to the noon prayer. And the market still hums because everyone has learned each other's clock. Shrines and saints make the overlaps visible. A single hilltop with a whitewashed dome draws candles from Christians and vows from Muslims, each greeting the same figure by a different name. A mother ties a ribbon for a sick child. A fisherman leaves oil for the lamp. A shepherd scratches a prayer on plaster with a nail. No one stops to argue theology. The blessing is what matters. In some towns, St. George and, for many Muslims, Al-Hidr, share the same doorway, and the caretaker knows which incense to hand to which visitor. Daily agreements keep pluralism practical. Bakers learn both kosher and halal rules so a single oven can serve the whole alley. And a neighborhood endowment repairs the fountain because water belongs to everyone who draws it. Wedding songs travel farther than sermons. A melody from a church feast turns up at a village mawlid, a birthday festival for the prophet, with new words, the tune unchanged. Even calendars negotiate. Festival processions route around each other like seasoned traffic. None of this is fragile because it's sentimental. It's durable because it's useful. People who trade, neighbor, and borrow together find ways to keep peace most days. And yet the balance can seize. A new tax that favors one guild, a rumor that jumps a quarter, a harvest that fails and turns fasting from ritual into necessity, then doors that were held open can swing shut. To read faith here is to read practice before creed. The rules written in footsteps, who visits whom, who shares a loaf, and how a street learns to hold many prayers without losing its rhythm. If you had to find your footing in a street like this, would you trust more in shared markets, shared prayers, or shared memories to keep the peace? Some communities learned to live where big armies disliked to linger. High valleys, reed marshes, volcanic plateaus, the kinds of places that turn a map into guesswork, became homelands and hideouts both. In the Kurdish highlands, villages perch above switchbacks, fields stacked in terraces like steps for goats. Winter brings quiet and long stories. Summer opens the passes, and the world returns with traders and weddings. Family names still map to ridgelines as neatly as compasses do. Along older trade corridors, Armenian towns worked like punctuation marks. Stone churches anchoring streets of smiths and weavers, a school tucked behind a walnut tree. The bell that called pupils to lessons also timed the divats. Farther east, small Assyrian hamlets kept liturgy and cradle songs that sound older than the roads. Sunlight pooling on whitewashed chapels tuned for consonants. The Druze built on mountaintops with houses shouldering close, courtyards sharing shade and news. A guest might find a book in a niche behind a wooden screen and be offered coffee before questions. In sacred valleys, Yazidi pilgrims walk barefoot to a spring, flagstones warm even at dusk, lamps mirroring an oil like a fallen constellation. Hospitality is formal without being stiff. Everyone knows the steps. Down in southern Iraq, reeds rise taller than men. Houses curve into barrel vaults made only from plants and rope, arches repeating down a watery street. Canoes carry brides and sacks of rice. Buffalo stand half submerged like patient statues. Markets arrive by boat, the vendor's voice rowing ahead of him. Some arrived by compulsion and remade home anyway. Circassian families, resettled in Ottoman times, taught horses to dance on Levantine plains and fenced farms with stories about mountains far away. These refuges can feel secluded, yet their doors open at the sound of a familiar greeting. That's the paradox. Isolation protected difference, and welcome protected it longer. Small places turning into strong boxes where songs, recipes, and rules could wait out history, then travel again when the path was safe. Listen closely, and a single conversation can carry half a map. A porter counts crates in Arabic. The merchant totals them in Persian on a scrap of paper. And the accountant files the result in Ottoman Turkish, with tidy numerals in the margin. The words don't collide. They dovetail like joinery. In one drawer, you might find a trader's letter that starts right to left in Judeo-Arabic. Arabic words written in Hebrew letters. Then shifts mid-page into plain Arabic for the courier who will carry it. No one pauses to explain. The handwriting changes, and the work moves on. Languages specialize. The pulpit favors High Arabic for sermons and law. The alley trades in punchy dialects for jokes, prices, and directions. A judge quotes a verse in polished Arabic, takes testimony in the local tongue, and signs off with an old chancery line that outlived the dynasty that coined it. Persian tends gardens and love lyrics. Turkish names military ranks in kitchen tools. Greek and Italian ride the dockyards with ropes, anchors, and bills of lading. Open a spice drawer and you can almost read the loanwords by smell. It's the same people shifting registers like a group chat. Formal in one thread, playful in another. Scripts behave like tools, not fences. A clerk writes Arabic and Syriac letters to keep a community ledger in trusted hands. A merchant keeps an Armenian account book with side notes in Turkish for a partner who learned his numbers on the road. A priest marks a hymn with Greek musical signs, and a borrowed Arabic word for a small drum. In the Cairo Geniza, a medieval synagogue archive, everyday scraps, shopping lists, IOUs, babysitting instructions, slip between Hebrew script and the language of the street, the page itself shrugging at the switch. And beneath all this, a veteran tongue hums along, comfortable between worlds. You hear it in prayers, legal formulas, market slang, the lilt of a night song. A farmer swears by it, a scribe leans on it, a grandmother folds it into a story without noticing. In this web, languages are not rivals. They are instruments in an ensemble, passing the melody, sharing rhythm, and keeping time for the next handover.
Open a kitchen door near a port and the whole region walks in. A baker lifts a tray of honeyed pastries that locals call by a Turkish name, soaked in an Arabic syrup, layered with a Persian rolling technique, sold from an Armenian storefront to a Greek sea captain who takes 2 for the road. The recipe belongs to everyone who can make it flaky enough. A stew bubbles nearby, sour with tamarind from a Gulf ship's hold, bright with lemons that keep their shape because a grandmother learned the trick from a neighbor whose cousins live in the mountains. Bread anchors the table, but the shapes tell a route map, thin and blistered for quick travel, puffy for a city oven, sesame-crowned for feast days that overlap on the calendar more often than you'd think. Listen at dusk and the oud is warming up in the cafe. The melody comes in a scale that knows where to lean, a musical mode shared across synagogues, churches, and mosques, recognized instantly by a child who heard it as an evening song, and by a drummer keeping time for a wedding where the guest list includes 3 languages and 1 rhythm. Coffee clatters to the saucers, and a story rides the steam. The beans took the sea, the brass pot came from inland. The word for the foam is older than both. It's a playlist long before playlists, passed cup to cup. On a side street, a tailor pricks a cuff with a pattern he calls by a local name, though the motif traveled on saddlebags centuries ago. Embroidered borders map the marriage of 2 villages better than a registry does. Metalworkers chase vine scrolls that owe a detail to a Byzantine mosaic and a curve to a Persian garden plan, the hammer teaching the hand what looks right. Even boats carry proof. A haul along the Gulf uses Indian timber, East African fiber for rope, and a prow cut to a curve that shipwrights swear by in 3 languages. The launch is a small festival. Spice smoke and sawdust mix. A drum answers a whistle, and the crowd names the craft in whatever tongue the wind brings back first.
People here have always moved, and movement leaves threads. Pilgrims set out with sandals and blessings. Herders follow grass by season. Traders ride the monsoon or the steady wind. Laborers chase harvests and wages. Each path builds a memory on the road. Which well tastes sweet? Which shrine throws shade at noon? Which courtyard lets you sleep near the animals so you can leave before dawn? Diaspora turns distance into habit. A weaver from a mountain town apprentices at the coast, learns to cut trousers for sailors, and writes home about a stitch with a foreign name. In a port, a baker from inland starts kneading before sunrise, so ferries carry the smell across the water. Letters cross like birds. Today, it's remittances and voice notes, but the root is the same. A cousin in Cairo arranges a marriage. A nephew in Bombay finds a buyer for sesame. An aunt in Marseille keeps a trunk of festival clothes that still smell faintly of cedar. Trust becomes currency. A traveler carries a folded note from one merchant to another who has never met him, yet honors the promise because the signature is familiar and reputation moves faster than ships. Gifts extend the route. A single endowment pays for lamps along a desert path. Oil purchased each year by a caretaker who knows which stretch spooks camels after dark. In towns a day's journey apart, a bed, soup, and a place for animals wait behind doors painted the same color. A quiet signal for those in the network. Exile moves along these channels too. Families uprooted by war or tax change bring the portable parts of home. A prayer at the first mouthful, a recipe that needs only a pot and patience, a proverb that sits in the mouth like a landmark. Over time, the far shore becomes another branch of the same neighborhood. Market days double as reunions.
Pilgrim stops feel like cousins' houses. The road keeps its own calendar, and when people meet at a dock or a shrine after years apart, the conversation resumes mid-sentence, as if the journey itself were the shared address.
In the 20th century, straight lines marched across desert and river, and new flags went up where old caravans watered their animals. The atlas finally looked simple. On the ground, the older map kept breathing. Towns still sorted themselves by craft and kin. A wedding guest list reached farther than the frontier it crossed. Checkpoints changed routes, not instincts. A shepherd who once climbed from winter lowlands to summer ridges now times his move to the quiet hour at a border post, trailing sheep past a marker his grandfather never noticed. In market towns split by a line, the bazaar sets up anyway. Awnings shade both sides, prices bounce between two currencies, and haggling sounds the same. A customs officer buys bread from a baker whose cousins live across the wire. The coins ring in the same tin. Older agreements keep working because they solve problems the map never tried to. Water rights belong to whoever cleared the canal last year, a fact remembered by 3 villages and the caretaker with the key. A convoy passes safely because a mother once sent coffee to a guard's sister in a lean month. Elders settle a quarrel under a tree that shaded disputes before the checkpoint existed, and the losing side accepts the verdict because the tree remembers everyone's stories. Lines do harden. A new tax rewards one road and leaves a rival town quiet by noon. An ID turns an old path into a gamble. A rumor leaps the fence faster than any trader, and a street that learned to share goes tight and narrow. Even then, the social map looks for detours. A trucker changes the radio channel and follows last year's wedding convoy like breadcrumbs. Neighbors clear a canal after floodwater drops, and the workday repairs a truce the paperwork could not. To read the region honestly, keep both maps in hand. The tidy one in the atlas, and the unwritten one carried in pockets, marked by errands, kinship, and the shortcut every local knows. We've walked the riverbanks where strangers share a key, climbed mountains that shelter songs, and stood in markets where recipes and proverbs change hands like tools. All that mixing wasn't noise. It was a rhythm guiding how people met, traded, prayed, and argued without breaking the street. Now for the thread many of you waited for. The bridge language that quietly connected more empires than Latin or Arabic? Aramaic. For centuries, it ran the errands of power and the gossip of everyday life. Acumened officials used it to knit provinces together. Traders trusted it at scales from Egypt to the Persian Gulf. Judges leaned on it when 2 other tongues in the room could not agree on a script. It was the voice that made distant places feel like neighboring stalls. And here is the part that turns maps into goosebumps. You can still hear Aramaic spoken today. Step into a hillside village like Malula, where the limestone keeps the afternoon cool, and a shopkeeper might greet you in sounds that once crossed an empire. Listen in Assyrian and Chaldean churches, and the prayers rise in a cadence legible to scribes who stamped clay long before the ink of modern borders dried. A grandmother can hush a child with an evening song whose bones are older than the road outside her door. That survival isn't an accident. It's the habit of connection we've traced all along. Rivers teaching cooperation, passes acting like zippers, ports turning strangers into neighbors. The Middle East's truest map isn't the lines we draw. It's the threads we keep. Aramaic is one of those threads, still warm from use. If this reframed how you see the Middle East, tell me which connection surprised you most, or where you've heard echoes of Aramaic today. Like, drop a thought, and subscribe for history that breathes. Tap the bell so you don't miss the next dig. Now jump to your next stop. Iran's theocracy is older than Islam, or the full Ancient Middle East playlist, both on screen and linked below. Until next time, keep questioning, stay curious, and remember, tomorrow has always been ancient.
Their trade winds still fill our sails, and their voices still travel in ours.